Hello and welcome to YesterYear's Mac Games, where today we've got a bit of a knee-jerk reaction here to something that has popped up on Macintosh Garden. Truth be told, I wasn't planning on uploading anything this month, but the emergence of a port of the original Transport Tycoon for Macintosh rather took me by surprise, and was interesting enough to pull me away from the new Smash Brothers long enough to pull something together. Transport Tycoon then should need no introduction. It's a darn good game by Chris Sawyer, and was published by Microprose for DOS in '94 and later Windows. Digging around for information on the port brought me to the TT forum, where back in 2003, the board admin and big fan of the game Owen Rudge got a response from Mr. Sawyer to his letter asking if there were any other versions of the game. Chris explained that their Japanese publisher requested and paid for a Mac port, which was developed in the UK in English and Japanese. Microprose chose not to publish the English version, and was then acquired by other studios a couple of times before eventually being shut down. So unless perhaps the port developers Ian Richards and Dave Fawler, or anyone else involved, kept it somewhere, it's probably been lost to time. Fingers crossed that this isn't the case. This Japanese Macintosh version kept itself quite buried over all these years, but as it turns out, originally emerged in early 2017 in the German forum TTMS. User Coney Cost had won it in an auction and dumped a disk image. The one at the Garden may well be different, as it comes with the scanned manual. In this, we can see that the game runs on a 68030 processor and above, requiring 6 megs of RAM, 15 megs of disk space, System 7.1, and 256 colours or greys, I can't tell. I've tested this on a 68K system and a much newer PowerBook G3 to find that it runs absolutely fine on both. One oddity is the game's music. QuickTime handles the MIDI files, although any newer than the version that comes with the game's disk image, and it plays at such a low volume it might as well be off. I thought it was broken until I noticed the sound input bouncing around in OBS. Those familiar with the soundtrack, which is playing in the background of this, will have noticed that it's a bit different from the other versions out there, and if I'm honest, it doesn't sound good at all in comparison, the trumpet especially. So what's this Japanese language port like to play? Well, it's quite tricky, but not because of the language. I've sunk an awful lot of time over the years into OpenTTD, the game's open source remake, so I kind of know what all the buttons do. Oddly enough then, harder than not knowing what the text says is having to do without all the features and conveniences that the deluxe version of the game and OpenTTD added. This is actually the first time I've played the original. The Mac port is dated April 1996, which is a bit strange, as the deluxe version of the game came out a year earlier. So porting the original instead of that seems like an odd choice. So what are the niceties that we're lacking here? Well, there's no one-way railway signals, no play area customization aside from what's in the difficulty menu, no click and drag to place rails diagonally, no list of industries and towns, one tile set, the Mac-specific problem of having to hold down the command key to right-click and drag the mouse around, the game's famously rubbish AI pathfinding can't be improved, and a fixed resolution that really feels a bit too small. This is what dates the game the most. I'm trying to schedule a bunch of trucks to go from A to B here, and I can barely see any of the play area to select the destinations. I had to turn off the newspaper as well, as it more or less took up half the screen. Gameplay-wise, the biggest difference for me is the aforementioned inability to make signals one way, and this drastically limits the complexity of the rail network that can be built. The player would have to rely on passing points to get multiple trains on one line, or a spaghetti mess of lots and lots of tracks that just look naff. Trying to figure out the stats of a train in Japanese is difficult too, although if I'm honest, I never paid much attention to those in the first place anyway. So most of these complaints are as a result of me having gotten comfy with a modern remake. Making massive rail networks on huge maps in vastly superior resolutions with the UK locomotive mod is great fun, and I can't do any of that here. But from the point of view of the era that this was released in, the game still comes across as a competent package. Players still have the task of turning a profit with road vehicles, locomotives, aeroplanes and boats, while all the industries and their outputs bring plenty of different cargoes to do it with. There is fun to be had here, but I do think it's a bit easy. Once you figure out how to turn a profit, nothing really stops you from doing whatever you want. With the exception of the music, the port to Macintosh is flawless. I experienced no instability on the Macs that I tried it on, and people have reported it working under emulation with Sheepshaver, so that's always a plus for accessibility. That said, OpenTTD has had OS X builds since almost the very beginning, and the current stable, which at time of recording is 1.8, is still built to run on PPC Macs, running at least Panther. Unfortunately, you'll need to compile it yourself, as the PPC code has been broken in the official download for quite some time. So unless you know what you're doing in Xcode, version 1.2.3 is probably the version to go for. 0.4.8 is the last one to support Jaguar, and I was pretty pleased to see that my 400 MHz Pismo runs it absolutely fine, which is awesome. So with that, we'll finish up here. I just wanted to emphasise that it really is incredibly cool that the Classic macOS version of the game has surfaced, and I may well muddle my way through a few more games of it further down the line. Obviously, OpenTTD is probably how you'd want to experience this game, not least because it comes in English. Irrespective of that though, it's still worth having a look at this if you've got an old system to try it on. So, pop your thoughts in the comments, and tell your mates if you thought this video was any good. For more content on games for Classic macOS, check out the rest of my channel. Other videos are a bit more reviewy than this one was. Otherwise, thanks ever so much for watching.